name's Kim and I live in Chorlton in South Manchester, and I've lived in the same house for 30 years now. And round the corner from my house is a beautiful field which we call Ryebank Fields, and it used to be owned by the City Council, and then ownership passed, but without any exchange of money, to Manchester Metropolitan University. They used it for sports fields for a while, and then they realised it wasn't suitable, so they left it. And since then, they keep trying to build houses on it, and it's become a much loved local space. And as we've become more aware of environmental issues, lots of us, including myself, have become really worried about this plan of building houses on a beautiful rewilded site.
A bit of history of Ryebank Fields is to the east over there is St John's School. Now that's actually built where the Jackson's Brickworks factory used to be. So, and the clay pits, which were here on Ryebank Fields, are where the clay was mined to make the bricks. So all the bricks for Jackson's Brickworks were made here. But as the day is called, as the whole event is called, this is Greenfield. No buildings were here. This is what's called a Greenfield site. And all planning policy dictates that homes should be built on brownfield first.
It's a ridiculous place to put a site. It's been a tip. It's been a clay pit. It's filled with asbestos. It's filled with brickworks and rubble. And it's a tiny, tiny corner. Why do we have to monetize every single piece of land?
The very first ideas about building on this land came about 80 years ago. It was in the 50s when the landowner at the time wanted to build housing here, and the council at the time said no, they wouldn't allow it because this area needed green spaces for the young people of the city and the adults of the city, but places for people to play and to walk and to enjoy a feeling of nature. So the council spent several tens of £1,000s buying this whole area to protect it. And then in the 70s, under Operation Eyesore, they received central government funding to remediate it, because I'm sure other people have spoken about the history of the land and the contamination underneath. So that was part of making it safe for people to play football on and walk their dogs on and all of that. But then once the land was allocated to Manchester Polytechnic, which was then part of the council for the playing fields, within about a decade they decided that they didn't want to have the playing fields here anymore, and they abandoned the fields to go and move that facility to Carrington.
What really matters to me is that this site is unintentional. It's just nature doing nature's thing. It was being left fallow for maybe 30 years, I think, something like that. And in that time, nature moved in. And if you compare it to the park next door, Longford Park next door, yeah, they're both on a map, they're both green space, but obviously some people would talk more about the experience of being there, about what being in nature does for you. But for me, it's nature for nature. I really like the fact, and it really matters a lot to me, that there's space left in the world for nature. One of the things that I value about nature is the fact that it is external to humans. It's not part of us. It's important. I think it's important that there are parts of the world that are not like they are because we want them to be that way.
I'm a local resident of the Ryebank Fields. Have been for a long time, have been enjoying them for a long time, and we're here just for my part to raise awareness of what MMU is doing. We've got potential students here coming today. It's an open day, and I think a lot of them will not be aware of anything really regarding MMU. And the thing is, the way I see it, MMU is claiming to be very green and boasting their amazing green credentials, which I think do not quite reflect the reality.
People often say, but we need more housing. And they're right, we do, but we don't need luxury housing. We need decent, affordable, social housing. And in Manchester, in Chorlton certainly alone, I think there are about 16 other developments that are currently ongoing. So we'll have what's called like a surfeit of housing. So currently we don't have a shortage in Chorlton. But as I said before, it's an M21 postcode, which means that the developers will make an awful lot of money.
So they will say it's about providing housing, simplistically, and it's, you know, it's a popular argument, you know, an understandable argument, but, you know, we're not anti-housing. I mean, there's 1,000 plus houses being built around the corner from me in Stretford. I live in the north end of Stretford, and some people aren't happy about it, but I'm absolutely happy about that. It's fine. It's not about not wanting housing in Chorlton. It's about not wanting to lose a nature space in Chorlton that's really valuable to people. If you just carry on building until there's no land left, there will be no nature spaces. So and we're not the only people to say that. So Greater Manchester Tenants Union agree with us. You know, they have passed a motion to support our campaign because they understand that this proposal is not really about, you know, Manchester Metropolitan University aren't wanting to develop this land because they have an interest in meeting housing need in the city.
I think it's greed, it's profiteering, it's this land was gifted to Manchester Polytechnic by the council. It belonged to the people of Manchester. It was gifted under covenant for educational purposes only. When, after the 1988 Education Act, it was formally transferred, because obviously when it was gifted originally, Manchester Polytechnic was part of the city council, because the polytechnics were council owned. But then in 1988, it was formally transferred under the Education Act as the universities were privatised, the polys were privatised and became universities. So it went out of public ownership then into private ownership, and that was in 1988. It was formally transferred in 1992. In 1996, Manchester Metropolitan University had a planning application in. They moved their sports facility to Carrington and had a planning application in 4 years later. So to me that speaks of greed and of profiteering from public land.
So that was the first time there was a kind of idea about trying to build in sort of recent history. I guess it's not that recent anymore. So then that was fought. The planning permission was refused by the council on grounds that we say would still stand today. And yeah, in the early 2000s, so only a few years later, they came back again and asked the council, we're thinking about doing it again. And the council just went, like, don't even bother, because we will refuse you again. Nothing's really changed. So it's quite interesting that between, say, 2005 or around that time and 2015, something changed. And suddenly the council were more amenable.
I think you can point to the declining power of local authorities to act kind of as actors in their own right, due to austerity and due to, you know, attacks on public planning, particularly the coalition government, the Localism Act and so on. Kind of a lot of planning departments were kind of gutted after that. So this sense that the local state can kind of act towards some kind of plan, I think has been diminished. And I guess in the context of the 90s, that was more of a present reality. So the council would have been more able to throw out these kind of proposals because they had a certain kind of planning framework for that neighbourhood. And as you say, they would have, they allocated the area as green space and kind of public amenity. So that's one picture, is that generally I think local authorities are less empowered to be able to do this kind of rejection, but also because of that changing context, and also I think Manchester has led the way in some of this. The planning department becomes more of an instrument to allow private actors to kind of move forward with their developments, rather than safeguard and balance private actors against wider public goals and public good.
Manchester, this isn't happening in a void in terms of development of the city. Manchester Metropolitan University are a big property owner in the city. They have a relationship with the council. That relationship will continue, whilst, before, during and after this whole campaign. So the councillors will be taking these other factors into account. So we have to impress upon them that this local campaign is worth them, has to be given more weight, and all these other macro factors that they might be taking into account.
Which is basically because Manchester's economic strategy is very reliant on the fact that we do have these large universities and large student numbers, and a kind of research science base, tech base, and so on. So there's a sort of there's a desire to sort of maximise that and provide a kind of friendly public planning context around that. So there's the creation of the kind of strategic regeneration framework, the development framework for the Oxford Road Corridor, and I think the prioritisation of those institutions, the universities, within the broader economic plan of the city as a whole. And I think that is sort of just a fact of sort of how a post-industrial city like Manchester has been able to kind of develop itself economically, in the aftermath of deindustrialisation.
What we say about housing need in the city is there is not a shortage of land to build housing on. And this housing land assessment tells us that, because there's a 30% excess. So if you look at what the government target is for the city, there's enough land in Manchester to build that plus another 30% over the next 5 years. And the other important number from that big massive spreadsheet is it tells you whether the land is greenfield or brownfield or mixed. And greenfield only land makes up 1% of that entire list. So if you think about what I said before about 30% excess, if you protected all the greenfield land in the city and said we're just not going to build on any of that, you've got a 29% excess instead of a 30% excess.
Well, the truth is, this camp, we didn't want to come here and camp originally, but MMU said they were going to appoint a developer in May or June, and we thought that a good time to camp would be just before a developer was appointed, so that we could put off a developer. So we camped here. The first night was the anniversary of Kinder Scout Trespass, and some of us trespassed across Chiltern and Wassail golf courses. We got a good reception actually, and marched through Chiltern and arrived here. And at first we thought we'd only stay 2 or 3 days, maybe people would go back to work on the Monday. Then people stayed, then we thought, okay, let's leave it until the local election campaign. People stayed again, and here we are 5.5 months later, and we're still here. And they still haven't appointed a developer, and I'd say it's largely because of the camp, but maybe they're just inefficient. I wouldn't put it past MMU. At the moment, we're building a straw bale house, an eco house. It can be taken down probably in about a day, which is our intention once we've won the campaign. But yeah, its main purpose is to keep us warm and give MMU an even bigger headache. If I was a developer, I'd be pretty wary of coming here and trying to kick us off. We are a big headache. I live around the corner. I don't regret 1 minute that I've spent on this camp. I feel very, very strongly that we can win this campaign, and I'm going to do everything I can in order for us to do that.
The presence of the camp as well has really added to kind of like the community dynamic. You know, we had a little swap shop going on last weekend. You know, we've had all sorts of people come down and just kind of like see what's what. You know, some people might just spend a night, see how it is. Other people might decide to stay, and you know, if you just sat on camp during the day, people just come up and say, "Oh, what's going on here then?" And like, you know, we let them know, and they're all informed. They know all about it, and as soon as it clicks, oh, that's why we're camping here. You know, they're coming down with tea and biscuits next time they're down. This is the aspen grove. So these aspen trees, the rumour is that they're all actually one tree, or descendant from one tree, because the way that they grow is subterranean. They just kind of like sprout up, like all around, or so I've been told. And you can see the path that's been formed through here has been maintained solely by the local residents. And to just walk through it is just an experience in itself, you know. Completely unique. I don't know, I can't really even think of anywhere else where a thing like this exists in Manchester. Yeah.
I mean, this campaign has been characterised by some as a NIMBY campaign, and you know, I could say a lot about that, but I do feel like, I mean, this isn't actually in my backyard. It's close enough that I can walk here, but I like the idea, you know, that some people talk about that I'm defending nature in my backyard, and I also feel like if I'm not entitled to defend nature in my community, then where can I? Like, where have I got more right to stand up for the non-human animals that live here and the plants that live here, and the people who love it? Where have I got a right to do that more than here?
I mean, I think NIMBYism is a fairly unhelpful term because it collapses these quite different realities and social groups and social classes and almost class positions into this one kind of vague sense of, you know, not in my backyard, regardless of who the person who is my is, and you know where that backyard is and what is being proposed in that backyard. So I think it's a fairly unhelpful thing, and I think it's been used largely to try and destroy elements of the public elements of the planning process. And this has obviously been a kind of long-running project since the 80s to try and undo the spirit of public planning in Britain that was brought in after the war, where you know, local democratically elected councillors would have influence over plans. So there was a sort of discretionary planning policy, and also planning frameworks were decided democratically by the local state. I think the use of NIMBYism can be kind of understood as the latest round in the attempt to remove democratic control over planning and largely hand it over into a kind of technical and technocratic process that ultimately, in the kind of current situation and the current balance of forces in society, favours private interests and private developers. I guess also I think it's worth just saying that, you know, with this democratic question, you know, if you do believe in democracy, and if you do believe in the people of a city having the say over the development of that city, then, you know, that's the core principle that is, you know, should be defended, and that's the kind of core principle that NIMBY, the concept of a NIMBY and the use of a NIMBY, the kind of the abusive nature of the use of the word NIMBY is kind of attacking, basically.
Right, so Wassail is an ancient tradition in this country. We don't actually know how old it is, we just know it started with the Saxons because it's in Old German. So Wassail literally means health to you, health to thee. Wassail. It's the same in Old Saxon, same in Old Norse. So when the Vikings came along, they found out that people were doing stuff they were doing back home, they quite enjoyed it. We do it with apple trees around this time of year because this is Old New Year. New Year used to be around the 7th, the 8th of January. Did they change the calendar 300 years ago? That's the whole story unto itself. I'm not getting into that. But what you do is it's the end of summer, the end of Christmas. The year is ending and we're starting to get where the days are getting longer and it's starting to get warmer. Well, allegedly starting to get warmer. And the apple trees, about 3 or 4 months ago, would have given up their apples. We would have had an apple day, you would have pressed them. I made some juice over at Platford's Market Garden out of all the apples. It was great. But now you need to give back to them. They're giving you cider, you've drunk all of it over Christmas, so you now have to give something back to them so you get more cider next Christmas. So what you do, there's 3 main traditions to this. A part of it is scaring away the bad spirits that might be haunting the apple trees. That's why you make noise, that's why you sing. We've got a little poem that we'll recite at the end of it, that's what that's all about. The second part is, anyone's got any bread on them? Or toast? Well, same thing. You leave that around the trees for the robins. Because the robins are nice and they're good and they bring you good luck apparently. Also I've been told. Nice. And the third part is you take any apple juice or any cider you've got that you've been drinking that you've taken from the trees and you pour it back on them. But we're going to start with some wassailing songs. You find them from all over the place, and we'll finish with Manchester's very own wassail song. Wassail, wassail. Ryebank Fields, Wassail, Wassail, to Manchester we'll all sail. So our song it is almost done, and with it I'll wassail too. I hope you will wassail myself as I do wassail you. For in the city of stone, well, the green is always near. And I hope to see you back again when we do this again next year. And Ryebank Fields, Wassail, in Manchester we'll all wassail.
You know, I mentioned 1979 before. I do remember 1979 when Thatcher was elected. And really what's happened since then is that a lot of our community organisations have gone. The unions, a lot of the churches, a lot of the pubs, they've gone. So the sense of community in a lot of places in our country has certainly diminished. But I think one of the most important things about Ryebank Fields is there's a really high sense of community. We all say hello to each other. I think you yourself, you've found people who are very friendly on the fields and almost all supportive of trying to defend these fields. So for me, the sense of community, obviously under the lockdown, the chance to go to somewhere and feel as though you're away from the city, to feel as though you're in the countryside. And that is so important for anybody's well-being. It's so for me, those are the two main things from the fields, but I do like my blackberry wine as well.